right. As promised, I want to talk about this case in North Texas about book banning. That's essentially what it is. This has to do with a slightly different take on that theme. Religious people have, since Gutenberg invented the printing press, I think religious people have tried to control what is printed, what is read, not just by children, but by anyone. The thing about religion, especially Christianity, you have got to involve yourself in the willing suspension of disbelief, which normally is what you engage in when you go see a play or a movie. But religion, Christianity, is much more fantastical than any play or movie that I can think of. So you've got to be a willing partner in your own deception. You've got to be a willing partner in declaring that you have absolutely no belief in science, reality, logic, truth, justice, none of it. That everything, once you become a Christian or practically any religion, really, once you take that step and become totally involved in the cult, whatever the cult is, you have to forego everything that you know to be in the real world, because religion exists in an unreal world. It doesn't exist in the material world. They're just stories and hallucinations and hints and tricks and so on and so forth. So it's just the nature of religion. I mean, I'm not making stuff up here. It's just the nature of religion, the willing suspension of disbelief and the willingness to start talking in terms that are illogical, nonsensical, mythical. Nothing wrong with myth. I love various myths, especially when they concern religion, because it gives me a chance to see how insane we allow ourselves to become. I shouldn't say insane, how non-sane we allow ourselves to become when we start talking about religion. Oh, my God. Okay, I'm getting way off the topic. This North Texas school district, they did issue an apology late last night because of this administrator who advised teachers that if they have books about the Holocaust in their classrooms, they also got to include reading materials that have, her term, opposing perspective to a genocide that killed millions upon millions of Jews. How do you do that? How do you find an opposing, I mean, they're Holocaust deniers, but, I just say to them, go fuck yourself. You don't even really exist. Just, I don't even want to hear about you, much less have to deal with you. But how do you oppose the reality, the truth of what the Nazis did to 6 million Jews? So the story here, there was a training session on what books teachers can have in their classroom libraries. And this administrator, Gina Petty is her name. And again, I feel kind of sorry for her, because I don't think that she meant what she said to come out the way she said it. But I'll get to that in a second. But she's the executive director of curriculum and instruction for the Carroll Independent School District. And during that session, she talked about a new Texas law that requires educators to present multiple perspectives when discussing what the law says are, quote, widely debated and currently controversial issues. Widely debated and currently controversial. The problem here is most things that are controversial right now are identified as such because of the bullshit and the lies and the twisting of reality that the Christian fascists are doing in just about every subject you can think of. That's why it's controversial. That's why the 2020 election is controversial. There's nothing controversial about it until the Christian fascists decided to make it so. So the whole idea of something being widely debated and currently controversial and therefore requiring all sorts of views and counter views and so on and so forth is in its entirety horseshit. We're not talking about philosophical concepts. We're talking about the horror of 6 million, in this case, 6 million people being destroyed because they were Jews. How do you, well, okay. Ms. Petty said at this meeting, that's according to a recording that was obtained by NBC News and now is all over the place. She said, quote, just try to remember the concepts of House Bill 3979 and make sure that if you have a book on the Holocaust, that you have one that has an opposing, that has other perspectives, end quote. And you can hear on this audio one teacher saying, and she sounded not just baffled, but she sounded like her credulity was being strange. She said, how do you oppose the Holocaust? And Miss Petty, the administrator, answered, quote, believe me, that's coming up, end quote. Now, again, I hesitate to indict Miss Petty for her stupidity in bringing this up. But anyway, it went up the chain, the food chain. The superintendent of the Carroll Independent School District, it's in South Lake, Texas, apologized last night and said, yeah, the recording was authentic. Her name or his name is Lane Ledbetter. And Ledbetter said in a statement that was put at Facebook, quote, during the conversation with teachers, comments made were in no way to convey the Holocaust was anything less than a terrible event in history. Additionally, we recognize there are not two sides of the Holocaust. So, redemption? It depends. I go back to Miss Petty, and I have to ask myself, even as I refuse to jump on the bandwagon that says, she should be stripped, tarred, and feathered and run out of town, I have to wonder where her sense of independent thought or education or truth or reality, where does her mind come to rest on those topics? Now, again, I said I don't particularly fault her for grabbing at that example, as horrifying as it was about the Holocaust. You have to have opposing views to that. But why would she pick that? I mean, seriously, what about something that was a few years later in history from the Holocaust? What about, why not say the bombing of Hiroshima? Why not say Roe v. Wade or Brown versus Board of Education? It's I just question, and I get very suspicious as to why she picked the Holocaust, unless there's something that she feels is not necessarily the truth about the Holocaust. And as a matter of fact, early today, Miss Petty didn't respond to requests for comments. So anyway, that was the incident in this North Texas school district, and it's the latest example of the madness that is part and parcel of the Christian fascist movement in this country. And the Christian fascist movement is probably the most active movement in the country right now. It is attempting to destroy the country, the whole concept of the Democratic Republic. It is attempting to stop children from being educated. It's attempting to deny women the sovereignty over their own bodies. It's attempting to turn on its head every single thing that they want you to believe their Messiah said. in the 2 or 3 sermons that he gave before he was executed. And it is the most active, violent organization in America right now, Christian fascism. The militias, the people that stormed the Capitol, they are Christian fascists. They carried signs and T-shirts that stated that fact, that that's exactly what they are. So it's the latest example, like I said, of how schools and educators and parents don't know what to do because of these new laws put in place by the Christian fascists. They don't know what can and can't be taught in the classroom. I mean, think about that for a second, if you dare. And much of the focus of this controversy that the Christian fascists have caused has been on the teaching of history, on the teaching of lesbian and gay issues, on the teaching of race, specifically this thing called critical race theory, which I don't know where the term came from. I mean, if we're going to teach our children the history of the United States and we're going to leave out what was done to enslaved African people, what was done to Native people who were utterly and absolutely forced to the edge of extinction, their land, their beliefs, everything stolen, taken from them. They were raped, beaten, just like the African slaves that came here. We're not supposed to teach that. Why not? I get stymied in talking about this because I know that you, gentle listener, are fully aware of what I'm talking about. And you don't need a blow-by-blow description or explanation, I should say, of what we're talking about here. I understand that. And I also understand that, and I hope you do too, that most of what you hear on this podcast is my anger, rage, frustration, disappointment, sickness about what I see happening, what I've been watching happening in this country for 40 years. And knowing full well that eventually it would come to this point, and we're not quite there yet. You know, passing a law like this is one thing. Enforcing it is the final step. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcast. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.